Hey, I'm Todd. Thanks for choosing to watch my video, and if you would subscribe it, like it, all that stuff, that'd be great. Otherwise, enjoy the video, and I hope it gives you the information you need and is helpful to you. Take care. Alright, timing belt and water pump replacement on the 2008 Kia Spectra 2.0 liter. VIN number is 2 for the engine. I have a jack underneath the vehicle on the oil pan supporting the engine because we'll be loosening an engine mount here soon. Take out these two 10mm bolts, move this power steering reservoir out of the way, and get one more 14mm bolt. Take this out, and we'll take another bracket out down here. So at some point, here's a little hole here in the pulley. We're going to line that up with a red slash inside here. You can see the indentation there. So at some point soon we'll be turning the engine over to line up that hole with that red dot slash in there. So here we are, close to the 10mm bolts for the water pump. Probably actually just get a wrench in there and break them loose probably. They're all broken loose, that's pretty nice. So then we'll work on loosening up our belts, taking them off. So we're probably working with even numbers, I think, here. So probably 12s and 14s and 10s. So here's the slide right here. This will slide back and forth for loosening and tightening. This is the pivot bolt. And we have on down here on the alternator a 12mm and probably a 12mm. Loosen this up. And below here, there's a 12mm nut. I actually already loosened the pivot, so it'll also slide here when you turn this screw right here. So that's what I will be doing. That's the inner belt. Nice long extension to get to the bolt on the alternator. Not a ton of space here to work on this bolt to loosen up the tension on the alternator. Just hope and pray that your bolt's in really good shape, and once you break it loose, you can turn it with your fingers like I am doing. Alright, so I'm just going to keep turning that so it's loose enough, and you can actually even just take this bolt out and get rid of all this and just push the alternator towards the engine and take that belt off. So, a couple ways to do it. So you can flip this out. So I'm going to take that belt off, and we'll have two of the belts off. Alright, and while I'm up here, then I went ahead and jacked up the engine a little bit and get just a little bit more space for the power steering, or the water pump. So I could just zip these bolts off, kind of sort of right here, like that. So that's what we'll be doing. And the water pump actually has this bracket in the way, so we'll go ahead and take off that bolt on this side, and there's two bolts here. We'll be taking this bracket off. Just go ahead and work that alternator bolt off as long as you're on the back side of the alternator, loosening it up to get the belt off. Inner pulley, outer pulley. Notice they both have a nice little hump / notch in it. Fits on the water pump, so these only go on the water pump one way because of the notch. Okay, truthfully, you don't have to take the alternator swing bolt out here. You can leave that in and take the 3 bolts out for the water pump and bracket here, actually. Two bolts up there, one's hidden by this hose, 2 bolts here. So if you want to, then you get that bracket out of the way, and then the 10mm bolt here for the lower cover, and 10mm bolt through here as well for this lower cover if you want to get it while you're up here and working up top. Alright, so the bracket was mostly in the way, so I just removed it, and there is the bracket. It goes like this. Alright, we're going below to remove the AC belt, assuming you have one, and then items down below. Here's the radiator cap. Usually push down a little bit and twist off. Of course, we'll be using that to fill up later. We can take that off. That will help coolant flow either from the drain if you choose to do that, or from the water pump when you take it off. And we can let the jack down. This does have a transmission jack holding it right down here. There's a transmission mount, so it'll be okay. It's not going to go anywhere. Down a little bit. Shield off 2 10mm bolts. If you want to start draining the coolant, there's a Phillips screw here. Right in there. It has a washer on it. If you want to start draining the coolant, you can take that out and start draining it if you want. Otherwise, coolant will just come out when you take the water pump out. So alright, took the cover off already as we talked about. Ooh, that belt looks like it's got some cracks. 14mm nut, and then I think a 12mm bolt to loosen it, like that, and then 21 or 22mm right there for that. AC belt. So that is a bad belt. Too many cracks per inch, I think. So they sell tools, pulley holding tools. If you have it, that'd be great. Or air tools are best, of course. You have something to hold this pulley in place while you break that loose, probably with a 1/2-inch breaker bar. But I will be using air tool. But before we do that, this is our opportunity to turn this and get our timing marks close. Here's actually a timing mark for the crankshaft right here. And there are some, there's top dead center indicated up here. So we'll turn and get that really close, and we'll go up top and check our camshaft mark as well. So we are very close. That looked pretty good there. And I think our top dead center mark looks pretty good too. Down there. So I'm happy with that, so we'll just zip that crankshaft pulley bolt off now. .22 millimeter. This should slide off. A little wiggling back and forth. I'm sorry if it's really rusty and doesn't quite do that. You might be able to get pry bars or screwdrivers on both sides and still try and force it off. Screwdrivers on the back side. Alright, then we can take our 10 millimeter bolts off here, and this cover should come off. 1, 2, I think there's just 3 more down here. And it should come off. So I'm going to zip those off and we'll be back. Alright, so I think it's best to take out the 2 14 millimeter bolts for this bracket. That's really how you can get this cover out. It's not really just coming out. Don't necessarily want to work it over the water pump pulley, so I think it's only 2 bolts, so not a huge deal. So we'll remove that. There's a bracket, 3 or 4 or 5 turns, and they got loose and took them off. The rest of the way by hand. And this will hopefully then come out much easier after that discussion about it. Or maybe we need to jack up the engine a little bit. It'll come out the top, maybe, since the engine's tilting down because of the motor mounts out. So I'm jacking up the engine, and so this will come out this way pretty easy then, pretty nice. These hoses. That is out, and then we can take the belt off. So we got these little grooves on the side here. Looks like too, they kind of go in line with the slant of the cylinder head. So I feel pretty good about the timing marks. I'll show them again after the belt's off. Here's our tensioner. Make note of the tensioner and where the 6 millimeter Allen head is pointed. We probably want to go in the same place. There's probably also arrows on there that tell us which way to turn it. So a couple things to be aware of. A 12 millimeter bolt. We will just basically take that bolt out and relieve the tension and take the belt off. That's what has happened. And then what's time? It's time for that right now. I can tell you the adjuster went down. from about the 4 o'clock position to the 6 o'clock position. And actually, here's the tensioner. So when we turn this arrows are going to end up, we want it to be in the middle of this. When we're done, we want it to kind of look like this with the tensioner in the proper spot. And these tangs here, these tangs are in a hole. The belt is off and out, and we can take probably 2 or 3 more 12mm bolts out for the water pump after we take out the tensioner pulley down there, which is covering up a bolt. Alright, so we'll take that pulley off and get the water pump bolts out. So we got our marks here lined up. We got the seal on. Don't have to do the seal, but that's our policy. So got that on. And then we'll 3 bolts down here, 3 12mm bolts for the water pump. So again, left to loosen, right to tighten, left 3 bolt, we'll take them out and we're gonna have some coolant gushing out of here. We got 2 to 3 bolts loose, or 2 to 3 bolts out. We got 1 more bolt in there. We just tapped on this and we're draining coolant out of here, kind of gingerly, gently. I don't know if it has a paper gasket. It's kind of sticky on there, so I'm kind of thinking maybe it does and it don't come off as well as the newer metal ones or a nice O-ring setup. So 1 more 12mm bolt to take out, and then we'll get the water pump out. There we go. Now I've thought about this. I don't think it says to take the power steering pump off, but I mean for 2 bolts, take the power steering pump off and move it off to the side, and you'll probably have some pretty nice room for the water pump. But I think we'll just actually, the coolant's out, we'll jack it up, it'll probably give us the room we need then. So, but the water pump's off, looks like. And we'll see about scraping gaskets. Ugh. Not a lot of paper left on the water pump, so we'll be scraping off gasket off the engine. And there is 2 dowel pins in the engine that fit in here, and that's kind of why it didn't necessarily tap off as easy, as held down there by 2 dowel pins. So we'll be scraping some gasket material off of the block, make it nice and smooth again. Razor blades, plastic scrapers, putty knife. It's not aluminum, so it's a little more forgiving than aluminum. But I'll need to scrape that clean. They do sell a gasket adhesive, gasket dissolver in a spray can. You could maybe buy some of that if you wanted to try it. But I'll just be scraping it with a razor blade or 2. Alright, I'm pretty happy with the water pump after scraping 2 or 3 razor blades. Use your finger and feel along there, make sure it's a nice, pretty smooth surface then. Maybe use just a smidge of a thin coating of RTV if you want to help prevent any leaks possibly. Keep an eye out for this gasket here when it lines up. There's some gaskets out there that have this that extends out, and it's a point like the water pump, but they extend too far and it would actually stop the water pump. So this is a nice gasket, doesn't have that issue, but we ran into a couple of them. Maybe they fixed it at the factory, but there you go, something to look out for. So we'll put the gasket on the two dowel pins down there, and then we'll slide the water pump on and bolt it in with the 3 bolts that we have available to us right off the bat. Just slide it right through this hole and mount it. Alright, we've got all our bolts started by hand. Got the bracket in, 2 water pump bolts here, and then the other water pump bolts in, of course. Everything's hand tight, or hand started at least, and we'll tighten down all the water pump associated bolts. We'll tighten down all the water pump associated bolts, 9 to 11 foot-pounds, and the 2 bolts on the top of this bracket are like 15 foot-pounds. So there's your job for that right there. Alright, so I did the upper seal here, and here's a good look at the red mark and the indentation that you're looking for through the hole on the camshaft pulley. There's my tool I talked about, holding pulleys, so you can break bolts loose and hold the pulley in place. So we'll throw that back on, torque it down. We'll put our idler pulley down below and put that on. Put the belt on, and then we'll slide the tensioner in place. So in your next view, you will see a belt on basically, and I'll walk you through that. You get a nice timing belt kit with a water pump, which I recommend. You'll get a nice sheet telling you how to do it in a couple languages, pictures, and torque specifications. Pretty handy. So that's the way I would go, I recommend. Alright, so the pulley's on. I stuck a rag underneath here to help hold the belt in the teeth. See my alignment? Got the dot indentation on the gear highlighted in white, and then the line on the timing cover / oil pump assembly there. So that's the bottom lined up, and then we'll go up to the top. Alright, so I've got the belt on, it's lined up, but they want to have really no free play on this side, and there's quite a bit of free play, I feel. So I'm probably going to take the belt off. I'm going to rotate this back 1 tooth, put the belt on and rotate it back, and hopefully likely everything will be back and lined up, and that'll be taut. So that's what I'm doing. Alright, so the marks are, I think I'm actually going to go back to it the way it was, and then just try and tighten up the belt and see how the cam and crankshaft marks line up. So this hole is maybe a little bit to the left, but I think that also my mark down below is off a smidge. So I think if we rotate everything, rotate this clockwise, we'll probably have to do it from the bottom though, because it'll jump teeth otherwise on the crankshaft. So we'll turn it a little bit, both of them clockwise a smidge, and I think all the marks will line up and we'll be good there. So just as something to tweak a little bit. But you want to have no slack on this side. That's the most important part, really, and then all the slacks over here for the tensioner to take up. It's not very easy to see, but I've been pushing this, starting the bolt by hand with my hand here. I think usually I take the pin out, though this time I didn't. And I can leave it in there. Just had to pull it out a little bit. And then we'll always want to go counterclockwise, as the instructions say, with the Allen here to get the tensioner right. As we talked about, we're going to turn it until we get the pointer in the right spot. I'm going to go ahead and pull this dumb pin here. There we are. Again, I've taken that pin out many times before before I installed it, so I'm sure you can take it off. We just want to go counterclockwise though now for installing it and getting the pointer to go in the middle of the window. I got a mirror and you can see the arrow and the little window. I've turned it and now the arrow is in the window. There's my wrench and my 6mm. So I'm going to kind of hold this all in place and tighten up the 12mm bolt. And then after it's all tight, I'm sure we'll rotate the engine a couple times and we'll double check where our pointer is pointing. Make sure it's still in the window. I'm going to use a mirror to look at my pointer and make sure it's in the right spot. Got my 6mm. We'll be going counterclockwise. You want us to turn the engine so the camshaft teeth have moved 2 positions. So we have it when the timing marks are lined up now, so we're going to move it so the timing belt and the camshaft has moved 2 teeth from its proper position. So for example, if this line is lined up with the edge here, we're going to go basically 1, 2. This spot right here is now going to come down here. That's what we're going to do.
There we go.
Well, I can see him moved out of position some. It's right on the edge, but I think I'm okay with that. I might turn the engine around a couple times and see where it's at, maybe, but I think we're going to be good with that. So I turned the engine over once and I put it back in the position for timing belt adjustment, and I'm happy with the window still. So I'm going to call that good, and we can, I guess, reverse procedure to install as the manual says. And I'll give you some torque specs for putting it back together. Uh, 17 to 22 foot-pounds for that one down there. Tensioner. 31 to 40 foot-pounds for the idler pulley down there. So you put those together and start putting your timing belt covers back on. So here's my setup: 6 to 7 foot-pounds for the bolts for the water pump pulley. There's my setup underneath the AC line. And this belt you can kind of just roll on, put it on the back here first, on the back side of the alternator pulley, and get it on here, and if you need to you can roll it on. It should just roll into place. That's my advice on there, and then tighten those up, and this is how I'm doing it. Alright, so we've just added a nice 50-50 mix of coolant. This was a gallon, and I put pretty much all of it in there, so you can expect to add a gallon, maybe plus a little bit extra for the overflow bottle here. There's a minimum and maximum line down there. If you get a flashlight, you'll see it down there. And when you're tightening your belts, maybe there's a tip. You can usually, there's some kind of indication of where the belt was originally. You can get it close to where it was. You can see it on the alternator. So tighten them up, and of course if you get some, I'd run it for 10 or 15 minutes. You gotta get it running anyway for the coolant. Get it up and running, go for your test drive, and come back and maybe double check your belt tension. You can always do them a little tighter if you need to. They might stretch a little bit. Wouldn't be the first time I've seen that. So put your radiator cap on, your coolant, and start it up and run it. Put your temperature to hot and put it on maybe vent or floor. Start to wait for some heat when you're running it. You should start to feel some warmth in about 10 minutes or so. And maybe raise it up to about 2,000 RPMs if you need to for a little bit. Help get that coolant circulating. And if you don't feel any coolant, or I don't imagine you'll have any problems if you couldn't get a gallon in there for some reason. Maybe there's an air pocket. So if you don't get any heat though, maybe stop it and let it sit for a little while, 15 or 20 minutes, and make sure you can squeeze the hoses and there's no pressure, and then take the cap off and double check your coolant level. And otherwise start it up again. If you got a gallon and a half in there, you should not have a problem getting some heat and getting it up to operating temperature. Drive it for 7 to 10 miles, get it to operating temperature, let it cool down, top off your coolant after a couple, 3 hours in the radiator and overflow. Right here, coolant. And that should be it for your timing belt on your Kia / Hyundai. Same engine in both. If you look on the engine, you'll actually see the word Hyundai when you're doing the timing belt on the left-hand side of the crankshaft pulley. Good luck to you.